And welcome back to a fresh episode of the Business Growth Show. I'm your host, Sam Dunning, co-owner over at webchoiceuk.com. And if you haven't done so yet, check out my weekly email where I'm sharing actionable website and marketing tips, useful podcasts, free goodies, and much, much more each and every Monday so you can start your week off with a bang. Why not give it a try over at businessgrowth.emails. So with that said, my guest today is Kristian Borghesan. Kristian's the VP of Marketing over at FutureVault. Welcome to the show, sir. How's it going?
Thank you, Sam. Really glad to be here. Thanks for having me on. It's going well. It's going well. It's a holiday here in Canada, so I'm having a bit of a relaxed day. But there's nowhere else I'd rather be than on a podcast with yourself. So it's going to make for a great day.
Relaxing's always good, man. I appreciate you joining us on a holiday. Excited to chat. We're going to be talking about the 3 fundamental pillars of marketing, and let's jump straight into it. Kristian, can marketing really be split into just 3 things? Is that even possible?
It's a good question, and it's a loaded question. And I don't want to say yes right out of the gate, because I know I might receive a lot of skepticism for that. But when you break down the core aspects of what goes into solid marketing and how to define your marketing strategy, create a go-to-market plan, and then actually define and leverage different channels and tactics, my answer to that would be yes. You can certainly break it down into fundamental pillars,
right,
that help you achieve your objectives and your goals. And you should be honestly looking at it in that regards. I think there's too much focus on all of the outputs of marketing, and everyone likes to obsess over what I refer to as the 10% of marketing. It's what you see, it's what you hear about, it's the vanity metrics, but not too many people obsess over what's taking place behind the scenes. And it's the 90% that make the 10% count, but people refer to the 10% as the 90% because they're not overly familiar with what actually goes into it or what should go into it. And I know probably that in and of itself is quite loaded. But we can certainly get into those 3 pillars.
Yeah, let's jump straight into it, man. So what are the 3 pillars that make up a marketing campaign?
Yeah, so the three foundational pillars would be strategy. So that's first and foremost your business strategy. You can think of that as your corporate strategy. And I'll go into each of those pillars in a little more detail, just to define them and give a little more breadth to what we're talking about. So your business and corporate strategy, which can then go into strategy across the different disciplines. So you'd have a product strategy, your customer success strategy, and how to service your customers. You'd have your marketing strategy, which would also be an output of that business strategy. Number 2 is your positioning. And I think this is really where all of the magic happens. And if you can solidify your positioning as a company, I like to refer to it as a cheat code. You can create this wicked positioning document that can be used internally. It's not meant for external use, but it really, really, really just helps you better understand how you fit and how you play within a certain market, to a certain subset of the market, and you unlock a lot of greatness, as I like to say. And then the third pillar that I like to refer to is messaging. And that, as most people know, your messaging is how you communicate about your brands and your service offerings to the market. Now, the first 2, you might notice that they're kind of fundamentally different. The first 2, I would say, are inputs, and then the third one, your messaging, is an output of the first 2. But the reason why I still bucket it as a third core pillar is because your messaging is really core to all of the other external ancillary activities and actions that you're taking as a marketing team.
Gotcha. Nice one. So those are the 3: business strategy, positioning, and messaging. Let's dive a bit deeper into each, sir, if we may. So start off with business strategy, and it sounded like that might involve marketing strategy as well. So
that's right.
Let's chat a bit more about what that means. I mean, to me, that sounds a little bit general, business strategy. So let's dive into the specifics and how that can apply to marketing and helping revenue growth.
Absolutely, and it is pretty broad in general in nature, and it's meant to be, right? So the way I look at business strategy, and I'm sure a lot of people, share the same views as I do. Maybe some do not, but your business strategy is really it's a clear set of plans or actions or goals that ultimately outlines how your business will compete in a particular market or markets with a product, again, your product or a number of products or your services. Now, the key thing here with business strategy is that it really should be sort of like the overarching guiding light of sorts for your organization. And really, you're probably like, okay, Kristian, sounds great. What does that mean? And really, what I mean by that is that your business strategy is there to create vision and direction for your
Okay.
entire organization. And it's important that, everyone within your company, they all have clear goals in mind, and they're all following in the same footsteps and working, down towards the same path or going along the same path or mission of the organization. Otherwise, if not, as we all know, this can lead to massive misalignment and, quite frankly, actually abuse of resources. You've got people doing things that they probably shouldn't be doing if that business strategy is not well defined from the get-go. And so your strategy provides vision, as I like to say,
Yep.
and it can prevent individuals from losing sight of why they're doing things in the first place, and really what their company goals are. So
Okay.
when you boil, and I know that's a lot there, and again, it's still pretty vague, right? But when you boil all of that down, you realize it's sort of just like the ultimate why and how, right? It's all about clarity, it's all about vision, it's all about mission, and importantly, it's all about purpose, right? So this, of course, is very high level, but you really get to start to see the importance of it all, and why having a solid business strategy in place is important.
Kristian, give us some examples of what might fall under business strategy. Um, Perhaps if you want to do it for your own company or other companies that you've worked with or helped.
Yeah, absolutely. So for our own company, we have a business strategy document, and this is actually something that we revisit on a quarterly basis. And the reason
Okay.
being is because actually all of these exercises or all of these pillars, for example, so even positioning and messaging, they're never a one and done type of ordeal. These are things that you
Mm.
constantly need to be revisiting as you introduce new product features, or your value proposition might change, or the market changes a bit, right? Or your product matures in any which way. And so for us, what we typically include in this business strategy document is, first and foremost, what is FutureVault? What is the market that we're going after? For example,
Okay.
us, we're in financial services, and we're also in the wealth management industry. Again, very high level, but then we break that down. Okay, within those industries, who exactly are the subset of those customers within those industries that we're
Okay.
trying to service. We've also got our mission and our vision in there, and importantly, and this is one that sometimes does get neglected in business strategy. It's often like somewhere else. It exists somewhere else in the organization, but not really translated within the business strategy. And that is our goal. What is our goal and our main objective as a business? What do we see ourselves doing within 5 to 10 years? Again, that falls into your mission and your vision. But then importantly, for 2022, what is it that we are trying to achieve? You can think of this as your North Star metric. And the reason why that's so critical, Sam, is because that acts as that guiding goal for all of the other functional areas in the department. So when I'm piecing together my marketing strategy, for example, I'm hanging on to all of those things that are within our business strategy to make sure everything I'm doing aligns with where we want to put the company forward and where we want to go as a company in 2022, in 2023, in 2024, and so on. And so that way, everything I'm doing, or everything at least that I'm planning on doing, it's reinforced by
Yeah.
that business strategy. And so without that, you're really missing a critical component of it.
Got it. Okay. So essentially, you recommend kind of putting together a clear document, and you said you do that every 6 months or so. Is that right?
Yeah, you can do every 6 months. We try to do it quarterly, actually.
Okay, quarterly, yeah.
Right smack at the beginning of every quarter, we try to do
Gotcha.
sort of like a reassessment or a reevaluation of
Got it.
everything. And that's just to make sure that there's alignment across the team.
And you're basically sharing in that what you do, who the target clients are, target customers, mission and vision, and
You got it.
goals for the next year, as well as kind of larger predictions, whether that's next 3,
You
5, 10 years.
you got it. And another important piece that often, again, gets neglected in these business strategy documents or exercises, however you want to do it. I wouldn't say there's any right way of doing it. Is not just the things that you include or the things to do as a business. It's the things or the areas to avoid as a business, and those are all of the lessons learned, right? And that's why actually even doing it on a recurring basis, whether that's every 4 to 6 months, you've got lessons learned from the last 4 quarters. Okay, what did you learn that went well? Cool. Let's adopt it. Let's implement it, and let's institutionalize it as part of our process. What were the areas that went wrong? Why did they go wrong? Did they go wrong just because flat out they just don't make any sense or they don't work? Or did we really not put our best foot forward?
Got it. Okay. Helpful. And should this be getting tactical, Kristian, in terms of laying down what you're actually going to do in terms of actionables? So it sounds like it's covering your goals, it's covering what you do, it's covering where you want to get to, and your vision and your learnings, not what perhaps didn't go quite so well. But then is it also laying out, right, this is what we're going to do, i.e., we're going to invest X amount in ads, we're going to do this on that, we're going to do this on our website, we're going to do this offline, we're going to do these events? Or is that later stages, or is that not even considered?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a few ways of doing it. I mean, you can bundle those two together, so you've got the why and the how from a very tactical point of view. That's often what I like to do. So when I'm, again, just as an example, the way I do it, when I'm structuring these documents, I always start off with the high level, the why, what's the purpose, what's the reason, what am I working towards? And then I start to get into the how. And that how starts off very high level, as you would assume. And then it gets very tactical and right into the weeds. And for a lot of people, this is sort of where the go-to-market strategy or go-to-market plan or document would really become of high relevance and importance, is that's where you would start to break down all of the different channels and the tactics within those channels and the way you're doing things. And, you can, like you were saying, you can even match it up against, hey, here's what we want to spend in paid social, for example, over the next quarter or throughout the entire year. But I would say a really good way of approaching it is just start off very broad. What do you want to achieve for the year? And then start to break it down. I like to break it down into quarters. And then with quarters, I can break it down into months. Then I can break those down into weeks and then days. So even again, as an example, at our weekly marketing meetings, I have a very clear idea of what our team is working on week over week, because I have all of this documented in our go-to-market plan and our executional strategy document. And some things might not line up, as we all know, priorities shift and things get bumped around, but at least it gives me a really good indication or idea of what are the next appropriate steps we should be working on.
Got it. And should you get super granular, taking it from strategy to actually implementation, is there a level of how granular you like to get, i.e., this week or this month, we're going to be focusing on these activities, whether it was doing certain things on your site, doing certain things on paid, doing certain things on certain channels, doing certain trade shows, depending on what you're in. How specific do you like to get on those type of things? And in terms of perhaps spend and resource allocation and these kind of things?
That's a really good question. I like to get quite specific. So if I'm looking at, let's say, the next quarter ahead, I know exactly what those next 3 months are going to look like for me, or at least I have an idea of what I want to achieve for the next 3 months. So I would have month 1, month 2, month 3. And within those months, I get very specific. Okay, here are the exact objectives I want to achieve. And here are the tactics that I'm going to execute on, or that our team is going to execute on. And then from there, it gets even more granular as far as to actually how are we going to achieve those? Who is accountable? Who's the task owner for those? Is there any spend involved? How much are we planning on spending? And then you can sort of match it up, right, as well, too, based on here's what we thought we were going to spend. Here's what we actually spent. Here's the return on some of that investment.
Got it. Nice one. Okay, well, let's move on to step 2. Let's move on to positioning. So yeah, let's perhaps give a breakdown to start with of what positioning actually means.
Yeah, positioning is an interesting one because I think it's highly misunderstood from a lot of different perspectives and from a lot of different people, or by a lot of different people. The way I would describe it is positioning ultimately will describe how and why your product is the best or one of the best, or a market leader for a specific subset of the market or your customers at any given point in time. And
Okay.
I always reference April Dunford. I'm not sure if you're familiar with April or her work, but she's arguably the best of the best when it comes to positioning in these types of things. And so I try to follow her as much as possible and learn from her and what she's putting out as far as content goes. And I'm just pulling something up right now in front of me, bear with me, which is how she describes what positioning is, just so you can see the definition from the expert herself. So April describes positioning, or defines it as: positioning defines how your product is a leader at delivering something that a well-defined set of customers cares a lot about. And so within that, you can kind of pick apart what some of the key ingredients or components of positioning are. And, again, like I said, there's a lot of misconceptions as far as what positioning is. I think a lot of people say, hey, positioning is my brand, right? Or positioning is my messaging. Well, it's not. And I can understand why you would get confused over that. But all of those things are outputs from what good positioning would be or should be, right? Again, positioning is an input, things that you're actively working on to then get a result from afterwards. And it's also important to note that there are overlaps, as you might assume, between business strategy and your positioning. And there should be overlaps, right? Your strategy should help you solidify your positioning, and it should be used as an integral component of your positioning, which is why there are overlaps. So if we want to break down what really goes into positioning, or how you can create a solid positioning document, or just really work on that positioning for your company, here's sort of 5 key components that go into it, along with a question that you can ask yourself to better understand that. So
great.
Say competitive alternatives is the first one. And again, this is sort of April Dunford's blueprint. I've read her books, and I've studied the blog, so I'm very familiar with it. Competitive alternatives. So that's, hey, if product ABC, my product, doesn't exist, what would customers use in replace of that? And then you really start to understand, okay, what's out there in the market? And then you start to better understand how can you position yourselves against these competitive alternatives. The next one is key unique attributes. And the question to ask yourself here is really, what features or attributes do you have that alternatives do not? Now you might be, there might be, overlap or some commonalities between the features and capabilities, but this is really about picking apart and making sure that you understand that there are key unique attributes that you offer and your competitors do not, which then leads into the third component of positioning, which is value or unique value differentiators. And this is all about, so what value do the attributes, so those unique attributes that we talked about in point 2, enable for customers? Are they saving customers time? Are they saving customers money? Are they reducing the back and forth and the manual workload that customers typically need to embrace and embody in their workflow?
Got it.
All of those sorts of things. And so you start writing these things down all in a document is what I would recommend. Number 4 is, so customers that care. In other words, this is, who exactly cares about the value that is described here. So in other words, segmentation. Segmentation is a huge part of your positioning. And it's also often a massive missed opportunity. And this one is really all about best fit customers. It's not
Okay.
hypothetical in nature, saying, hey, we want a service, or our product is great for every single individual on this planet, right? In every single industry. There might be some truth to that, which a lot of companies, it's the spray it all type of approach. But it's about getting really narrow and focused and understanding who of the segment within that market would actually buy from you today, and why will they buy from you. And then the next one is just context within the market. And that one is just really the category that you're operating within. So where your brand or service offering fits within the marketplace as it is right now.
Got it. Okay. So we've got 5 things: competitive alternatives, key unique attributes, value or unique value differentiation, customers that are kind of an ideal fit for what you do, which unless you're Coca-Cola, it's probably not going to be anyone and everyone.
Yeah.
And unless you have several
Yeah.
million a month to spend on marketing and ads, probably not going to be.
Yeah.
And then your content or category. Nice.
It's a pretty, and when you go through these 5 things, Sam, it's actually a pretty enlightening exercise. Like you start to see, and I don't mean to put it this way or preface it in any way, but like you really do start to see some of the flaws and holes that maybe you didn't once see from your organization and how you were currently positioning yourself. And I mean that in a really good way, right? Is that you actually start to learn where the true value is and where the key opportunity lies within your product or your service. And that's the whole part of doing an exercise like this. And so I would recommend, in the way we do it here, is we created what we refer to as a positioning document. We don't have a statement or a 1 paragraph type of blurb that we use. It's a document with all of these 5 things broken down. Again, a document that we revisit on a quarterly basis, only meant for internal use, nothing external. But what it does is it does allow us to create or do a better job at creating external documents that maybe we need to include some of these things if we're working on partnership proposals, as an example, right? So it's sort of like this. Again, I referred to it earlier on when we first got started here as a cheat code, and I will double down on that. It absolutely is a cheat code, and you'll see for yourself if and when you create a positioning document.
Yeah, we all like cheat codes, right? And
We do.
I think that's interesting because a lot of us spend a lot of time kind of on tasks or inside our business, and many of us, myself included, find it difficult to put our ego to one side, as in what we think is great, what we think is working well. Our own opinion, basically, is what I'm saying. And then until you kind of get together with your team, whether it is the rest of your sales team, your marketing team, leadership, and you actually do these things like comparing alternate competitive vendors, understand what is actually unique about your offering, pain points, problem you solve for customers, value you bring to them, how you improve their life, how you improve their business, understanding what customers you actually want to work more with, who drives revenue for your business, what sector are they in, what's their job title, what do they enjoy doing, etc.
All of those things. Yeah.
Until you do this, you're kind of just guessing, right? And you're just thinking you know what's right, until you actually get together with your team, or depending on the size of your org, whoever else is involved, and list them down. It's quite often quite surprising, isn't it? The details that come out and the learnings from these kind of exercises.
It is. And even when you're going through, all of those critical components that you just named off there that go into positioning, you're still sort of left assuming from your own subjective point of view and from what you think and how you're building the product. So a large part of really good research that goes into, I guess, helping you bolster or improve your positioning is talking to customers as well too. So when it comes down to, the key unique attributes as well as the value of those attributes, a large part of that is you've got to do your homework, not just with what you think exists or the value from your product, but you've really got to talk to the market about that. You've got to ask your customers, what is the value that they're actually seeing? And you need them to be honest with you.
Yeah, customer interviews, very, very powerful tool. We've got a lot of past episodes on those with guys like Ryan Gibson and many others on kind of what kind of questions you ask, if you want to refer to those and the power of those. So that's a great point. Well made, Kristian. Positioning. So you've given us a nice summary of kind of what's involved, what you should consider. How should you actually put this into play for your business to actually, I don't know, drive growth, hit your goals, hit your revenue targets? How can we actually take this document, this learning, and then apply it?
Yeah, and this is probably the part where a lot of individuals and marketers and companies get hung up is, okay, I've done this work. We've created this, this wicked cheat code of a document. We've got our positioning document in place that outlines the 5 things, maybe more if you want to take it beyond those 5 things that we discussed. Now what? Now what do we do? Right? And this is the part where we had talked about inputs versus outputs. Well, now it's the part to take everything that you put into this document, the key unique attributes, the value, the segmentation, the context, all of those things, and now derive an output from it. And that often leads to pillar number 3, which is your messaging. And so you're taking all of these things that you're learning, and then you're putting it out, or you're creating new messaging, or maybe reinforcing the messaging that already exists to learn from that, and to take what works or what you think works, and honestly test it. Everything is an experimentation. Everything is a hypothesis in business. You're not going to know unless you put it to practice. And so pillar number 3 is what I would say is the sort of the ultimate output of marketing, because of its importance and its impact across all of the activities and actions that you take as a marketing team. And your messaging is, there's a ton of different ways that you can describe messaging. The way I easily describe it is it's how you communicate and talk about your product or your service, both internally and externally. So it's how you describe the value of your product to your prospects, to your customers, and internally with your team.
Got it. So you mentioned the first 2 points are more input based. As we said, putting together the business strategy docs, talking to your team, putting together your positioning plan documents, messaging's more of an output.
That's right.
2 thoughts. Should only 10% of your time be spent on this? Because you mentioned 90% of work is behind the scenes and 10% is output. Does that mean only 10% of the time gets spent on messaging?
No, definitely not. I think your messaging is something, and the way a lot of organizations approach messaging is this. Maybe they'll work on this positioning document that we'll talk about. They'll refine their messaging. They'll come up with a boilerplate type of about messaging. They'll come up with their tagline, slogan, and a longer version of an about. And then that's it. Then they'll use it, and they'll use it over and over and over and over again until they stop using it, until they tweak probably 3 to 5 words at tops, and then they do the same thing again, right? Then they'll use it until they overuse it and abuse it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing here. But to answer your question, the way I approach messaging, and I think the way a lot more individuals and marketing professionals should approach messaging, is that it's an ever-evolving component of your marketing. So, to say whether you should be working on it 10% of the time or not is I would say it's a little tough to gauge that. And, forgive me if there's some misconfusion or some confusion there. I can't say I can really put a number behind it, Sam, other than just, saying this is an area that deserves a lot more attention than I think it, traditionally gets or currently does get, because of how impactful it is. And often when we think of messaging, we think of just like a written message, what we're reading with our words, but your messaging extends a lot more beyond that. It also translates and goes into your brand, right? How your brand voice is, how your brand communicates. That's all part of your messaging.
Yeah, I was going to ask actually. So for example, when I think of messaging, being a company that does websites and SEO, typically to me, it feels like it's your website, hero area, top banner area, strap line, your headline. It might be, like you said, in your about section. It might be your main call to action. It might be kind of points that you leverage on your ads, whether that's in LinkedIn, Google ads, social feeds, etc. Those kind of things. Is that really what messaging is, or is there a bit more to it on where it can apply?
There's definitely more to it. I think that is probably the best place to start with your messaging, again, because those are all the high visibility areas of messaging. But the main objective really with messaging is it's to connect with customers. It's connect with prospects over their preferred channels. And so that's not just marketing. That's marketing, that's sales, that's your customer support and your customer success team. And it's really all about just helping. Your messaging helps you to deliver a good experience and to match or meet expectations. And so within that, you can likely understand that there are different ways to communicate across different channels. What you had just referenced is a great example, because that's where a lot of prospects or a lot of customers come to interact with your brand. So it's sort of, the starting point, but it's not the be all end all. Your prospects might want to communicate with you in a very different way or on a different channel than your customers do. And so all of these different areas or these touch points of where your messaging has impact can be defined within a messaging matrix, is what you can create, but without overcomplicating it. I mean, the beautiful thing about having your strategy and your positioning in place is that it simplifies your messaging.
Sure. And on the note of simplifying, so the business strategy docs that we're going to create and the positioning docs we're going to create are going to be quite detailed, right?
That's right.
There's going to be quite a lot to them.
Yeah.
How can we simplify these into messaging that is concise, to the point, perhaps hits on a pain point, perhaps hits on a desire, a goal, objective of our target customer that we want to attract? How can we put all of this learnings into something that's easy to memorize, remember, quite concise and to the point, if they are going to be on various assets, whether that's our internal literature materials, whether that's going to be on external stuff that we want clients to see, whether that's on our website, our ads, etc. Any recommendations of how to use it all into one juicy or several juicy points?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, because as you're working on your strategy and your positioning documents, you may get overwhelmed because there's a lot that does go into it, especially if you're focused on messaging as a primary output of it all. And the key thing here is that you're never going to strike gold on your first try, right? So it's a reiterative process that does involve a lot of patience and practice. It comes down to organization, and it comes down to just how are you structuring these documents. And you've got to, and that's why going back actually into those five key components of positioning, is it's really, really, really key to make sure that you don't miss any of the critical components that go into it, because they ultimately will provide you with what you need as far as the messaging piece goes. So for example, understanding your key unique attributes and then understanding the value of them after doing your customer research or your customer interviews, that's where a lot of the golden nuggets are for a lot of companies. You understand a lot about how your product or your service is actually being used compared to how you think it was or once was being used across a different subset of customers. And so you've got to extract those nuggets, you've got to organize them, but then you've got to be able to pull them out and even move them over into a different document. And I know this sounds like, wow, this Kristian guy, he's making us work through a lot of the different documents, but it really does benefit you in the long run, in the long term, sorry, when you have all of these critical pieces documented and well documented, so that you can go back as an organization and revisit them and revise them and make amendments to them and continue to improve and iterate. So, a long-winded answer short is just, it's about being able to structure it well, but then extract the nuggets and then put them into a different document. And then you'll start to see where areas overlap and what makes sense. And again, you're not going to have just one messaging that you try right away. It's going to hit and it's going to resonate, and that's what you're going to use for the next, who knows, 1 to 2 to 3 years. Doesn't work that way, right? You're going to come up with a variety of different messages that you want to put out in the market, and you're going to test them, and you're going to see, based on different metrics that you're going to use to track these messages, whether or not they're going to work.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is there any recommendations you've got into actually know if your message is resonating, if it's actually working, if it's actually moving the needle, if it's kind of depending on what your objective is, whether it's an ad, if it's getting those click-throughs, if it's being consumed?
Yeah, and those are key ones to pay attention to, right? Is, hey, if you're running ads on them, and actually running ads is a really good way to test messaging very quickly. If you're doing it organically, it takes a lot of time, right?
Sure.
You've got to make sure that you've got enough volume so that it accurately represents your market or the subset of the market that you're trying to serve. So you can run ads, but I think ultimately what comes down to whether or not good messaging resonates or whether it sticks is, does your prospect fully understand the value of your tool and of your product and of your services after coming across some sort of messaging that you've put out there? So in other words, is there proper alignment between what you're putting out there and then the expectation of a prospect or customer? If they're coming across it, sounds great, they're interested, but then when it comes time to having a conversation with your team or your pre-sales team or anything like that, and then they're confused, then hey, maybe there's a component of our messaging that works really well because it's attractive to our ideal target customer, but there's a lot of misalignment and there's a lot of confusion. So we need to do a better job at clarifying that so that there are no confusions and that we better handle objections up front.
Got it. Okay, so it sounds like making sure that actually resonates with the kind of your prospects, your customers, so when they are eventually ready to speak to sales, they're clear on the value you bring to the table, how you're going to help them, how you're going to fix their issue, and so on.
You got it. Yeah, you got it, Sam.
Nice one, sir. Well, that's a lovely way to wrap up today's episode. So with that said, Kristian, thanks for running through the three pillars, or the three fundamental pillars rather, of marketing with us and sharing some actionables on each. Now, do tell us more about how everyone tuning in can learn more from yourself, connect with you, or the best way to get in touch.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite active on LinkedIn, so just Kristian with a K, Borghesan. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. More than willing to connect with and have a conversation with anyone. I'm also on Twitter, Chris, Kris, Borghesan, Borghesan, and those two are the best to find me.
Nice one, dude. And we should put all of those links over on the show notes over at businessgrowth.marketing. And with that, I want to thank you once again for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Sam. This was a blast.
No worries, dude. And as always, if you enjoyed today's episode, why not subscribe on YouTube? Or if you're tuning in on the audio podcast, a quick rating or review is always appreciated. And with that, we should catch you on the next episode for more No BS actionable web and marketing tips. Catch you soon.